Here are 3 things I know about you if you're watching this video. 1. You already know Stephen King rules. 2. You figured out the Wolfman's got nards. And 3. You've always wanted to be part of the damn squad.
I'm in the goddamn club, aren't I?
Alright, Monster Squad fans, so welcome back to 80s Dude TV. Today we're going to deep dive into the 1987 horror comedy classic, The Monster Squad, one of my favorite movies.
We're the Monster Squad.
So I've dug up some lesser known movie trivia for you, including behind the scenes secrets and some fun facts about the actors. So let's rock. Alright, so the 1980s were a significant time for the horror genre. It was a period when the slasher formula found its boundaries and contours, with killers and final girls growing to become cultural icons. So directors like David Cronenberg and John Carpenter were producing back-to-back masterpieces that still boast a robust following today. So in 1987, the same year The Monster Squad was released, other notable horror films like Clive Barker's Hellraiser, they also made their debut, and this was a time when horror was pushing boundaries and exploring new territories in storytelling. So for me personally, the 1980s horror films are my foundation for horror. The films were creative and didn't necessarily always rely on gore to incite suspense and horror. We can't talk The Monster Squad and not briefly mention TriStar Pictures. Now, who doesn't remember the giddiness one felt when you saw the studio bumper with the majestic winged Pegasus about to fly out of the screen with its wings outstretched? TriStar Pictures was established in 1982 as a joint venture by Columbia Pictures, a subsidiary of the Coca-Cola Company actually, HBO, and CBS. Now the idea was to share resources and split the ever-growing costs of making movies. By 1987, TriStar had already released several films across various genres. However, on December 21st, 1987, TriStar Pictures was renamed as Columbia Pictures Entertainment. And this was when Coca-Cola sold its entertainment business to TriStar for $3.1 billion. So really the whole point of this is that The Monster Squad came out during a transformative period in both the horror genre and within the film industry itself. And this is important because The Monster Squad is unlike most horror films. One could say that it was an experimental film that would only have been produced in those turbulent conditions. Now let's talk about the origins of The Monster Squad. Fred Dekker was born in 1959 in San Francisco, California. He's an American screenwriter and film director known for his cult classic horror comedy films. Growing up as an avid comic book fan, monster movie buff, and film nerd, Dekker was drawn to movies from an early age. Now, he was rejected by both USC and UCLA film schools, but attended UCLA as an English major instead. Now, while at UCLA, Dekker met future screenwriters Shane Black, Ed Solomon, and Chris Matheson. And in 1986, Dekker wrote the story for the horror film House and directed his first feature-length film, Night of the Creeps, which was an homage to black and white zombie movies. Now, these two films were stepping stones to Dekker's real passion for universal monsters. Shortly before Night of the Creeps, Dekker met his pal Shane Black, who wrote Lethal Weapon, by the way, and also starred in Predator, and they co-wrote The Monster Squad, which Dekker directed. This is important to remember, and we will touch on this a little bit more later. Their goal was to tell a story about a group of preteens, like the Little Rascals, who idolized classic monster movies and their non-human stars, and the adventure they would go on and undertake in order to save their town. Alright, so for those of you that may not already know, The Monster Squad is a 1987 American horror comedy. The movie's premise revolves around a group of young friends who form a club dedicated to classic movie monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, the Mummy, and the Gill-man. However, their knowledge becomes crucial when these monsters come to life in their town due to the efforts of the evil Count Dracula. The Monster Squad must then band together to stop the monsters and save their town from destruction, using their knowledge of monster lore to defeat the supernatural creatures. The film combines elements of comedy, adventure, and horror, offering a unique and nostalgic take on classic monsters and the power of friendship. While being financially unsuccessful during its theatrical run and receiving mixed reviews from critics, the film always had a positive reception from audiences and has really become a cult hit in the years since its release. Now, The Monster Squad had a budget of approximately $12 million, and the film grossed $3.7 million at the domestic box office. But it would certainly find its audience when it was released on video. Due to licensing issues, the visual effects crew of the Monster Squad had to create characters that were suggestive, but not exact copies of Universal's iconic monsters. This was a challenging task as these characters had to be recognizable to the audience while also avoiding any potential copyright infringement. The creature designers for the movie had to work very hard to avoid legal problems with Universal Studios, as the film is an affectionate tribute to Universal's iconic horror movies of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Here's the crazy thing. Universal was offered the film, but passed on producing it, and it was ultimately picked up by TriStar. I really wonder what it would have been like if it were produced by Universal. I'm not sure we would have had this style of rogues gallery for the monsters, though. I'm actually really glad Universal passed. How about you? The responsibility of reimagining these classic monsters fell on the shoulders of the special effects team at Stan Winston Studio. Most would probably recognize Stan Winston projects, as he is the renowned special effects artist known for his work on films like Jurassic Park, Aliens, and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. For the Monster Squad, his team had to strike a balance between maintaining the essence of these beloved characters and giving them a fresh look for a new audience. The result was a set of creatures that were both familiar and novel. For instance, the Wolfman's face was modeled after Stan Winston himself, adding a personal touch to the character. The designs were so effective that they managed to capture the spirit of the original Universal monsters while also standing on their own. Personally, I like the monsters of the Monster Squad better than the original Universal monsters. How about you? Make sure you let me know in the comments below. So this is interesting. Shane Black's first draft of the screenplay featured an opening scene with Van Helsing storming Dracula's castle with Zeppelins and hundreds of men on horseback. This sequence would have cost more than the final budget of the film. Can you imagine that? What we got was still pretty cool in my opinion. You know, the main idea was there. Personally, I like the opening of the film. Although far simpler than what was originally imagined, it was still suspenseful and opened the film up really well. Admittedly, Zeppelins and a cavalry of men charging towards the castle with pitchforks and spears would have been pretty rad. You know, the plane where Dracula first appears has Browning written on the side. This is a nod to director Todd Browning, who directed Dracula in 1931. The type of plane used in this scene is a B-25 Mitchell, a World War II bomber. This plane is significant because that's when Dracula releases the crates containing the Gill-man, Wolfman, Mummy, and Frankenstein's monster, basically completing his army. Alright, so one of my favorite things about the Monster Squad is the Clubhouse. Alright, now let's look at the screenplay to give us some context on the Monster Squad Clubhouse. Interior: Monster Clubhouse, dusk, male adolescent paradise, comic books, toys, magazines, posters, movie stills, all the Aurora monster models, including Forgotten Prisoner of Castle Mare, who isn't really a monster, but hell with it. Alright, so during the scene when the squad was giving Rudy the monster test, we can see some posters, including the Return of the Living Dead poster, Hammer's Vampire Circus poster, the Being poster, Lucio Fulci's Zombie poster, and so many stills from the original Universal black and white Dracula film. In different scenes, we can also catch glimpses of Masters of the Universe action figures, Garbage Pail Kids trading cards, and even a pirate flag. A little Goonies reference, maybe? Alright, so there were a few other actors that could have donned the cape of Count Dracula. Did you know Christopher Lee was initially approached to reprise his iconic Dracula role from the Hammer horror films from the 1960s? However, Lee declined the project. Now, Peter Cushing, known for playing Van Helsing, was also considered a potential Dracula, but his poor health unfortunately prevented him from taking the role. Now, actor David Warner, known for his films like The Omen and Tron, was apparently very interested, but couldn't work out a deal. According to director Fred Decker, his first choice for Dracula was actually Klaus Kinski, the intense German actor who starred in Nosferatu and Vampire. But the studio thought he would be far too frightening for a PG-13 movie aimed at kids. Several other well-known horror actors like Robert Englund, which was Freddy Krueger, and Chris Sarandon from Fright Night were also rumored contenders for the role early on. But eventually, little-known actor Duncan Regar was cast as Dracula after an extensive search. Bonus fact: the costume designer scared up an original vintage cloak once worn by Bela Lugosi in one of his Dracula films for Regar to wear in the movie. Hey, and last thing, and this would have been interesting, apparently Liam Neeson screen tested for the role of Dracula, as he was still a relative unknown in Hollywood at the time, having just appeared in films like The Mission and Excalibur. The idea of casting Neeson as Dracula was to go with a lesser-known actor and save money on salary. But the producers ultimately decided Neeson was too young and unknown, and wouldn't bring the right star power to Dracula at the time. Of course, we all know how Neeson's career took off shortly thereafter with roles in Darkman, Schindler's List, and so many more, including the Taken series. So it's interesting to imagine how playing Dracula in the Monster Squad might have affected his path to stardom. Alright, let's talk about the scary German guy for just a minute. The scene in the Monster Squad with the scary German guy is important because it highlights the fact that there are real-life monsters, such as Nazis, for example. The scene where the numbers are on the German guy's hand shows that scary German guy is a Holocaust survivor and that he has faced real-life monsters, just like the kids are facing fictional ones. This scene is a reminder that monsters are not just fictional characters, but can also be human beings who commit atrocities. Alright, so during one of the clubhouse scenes, Frankenstein's monster accidentally snaps a photo of Lisa undressing, presumably. Later, we cut to a scene where Rudy has the film printed at a Fox Photo 1-hour lab and discovers the photograph, spitting out his soda. Frankenstein's monster seems to be admiring it too. Now, even later, we cut to a scene in the clubhouse again where Rudy and Patrick are asking Lisa if she's a virgin. Now, after some back and forth, to get an answer out of her, Rudy flashes the photograph of Lisa undressing. Or so we think. In a revealing mistake, the picture that Rudy holds up is actually not a picture of Patrick's sister undressing, but in fact just a picture of a woman, fully clothed, standing by a pool with a home or a building in the background. Okay, so while there isn't really a romantic element in the film, there is the matter of Rudy and his crush on Patrick's sister, Lisa Rhodes, played by Lisa Fuller. Now, during certain scenes, it seems like Patrick's sister is more annoyed with Rudy than anything else. However, there is certainly something there, as Lisa chose to ride on the back of Rudy's bike just before the film's climactic scene. At the end of the film, we're sort of left wondering if Rudy actually gets the girl. Fortunately, there is a deleted scene that shows that Rudy does in fact get the girl. I thought it was really cool when I discovered the scene because it provides some closure on Rudy's character arc and the tension between him and Lisa. So let's check it out. All right.
That was very scary, but excellent.
Definitely.
Alright you guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something new. Please take a moment to thumb up this video and listen. If for some strange reason you're not actually following my channel, come on now. Hit the subscribe button and be a part of this club for more videos just like this. Thanks for watching 80s Dude TV. Stay rad.